It is the program in general education that's bringing you the evening, and this is our second annual, so in Harvard terms, I guess that makes it a tradition, our second annual program in baseball. This comes about, actually, you should be careful what you joke about. Over the years, I have joked with students that everything you need to know about life you can learn from either baseball or The Godfather. And I actually, well, it probably tells you more about me than life, but anyway. And also, at various times I've thought that in the general education curriculum with the 8 categories that we have, you actually, baseball is the only topic on which you could have a course in every single category. Some people have thought back, pushed back on that one, but I still think that that's essentially true. And so we've begun this, again, as I say, I hope a tradition of thinking about baseball and the way that baseball intersects in different ways with all areas of academic life and, of course, much more importantly, life itself. I also have the role here as the obnoxious Yankee fan to point out that while this is probably only true for about another 4 hours, the Yankees are still playing. Anyway, we have a wonderful evening, and nobody came here to listen to me, so I will just introduce all of our panelists. They're all up there for you. Leading off will be Jill Lepore, followed by Robin Kelsey in the second hole. We'll see if he can bunt. We will then move on to Steve Levitsky, Andrew Gordon, Mike Klarman, and then John Huth. So you see them all up there, and each of them, you can see the fields that they're in. We did all this to save the long introductions. So, tee it up.
And now for our starting lineup. Leading off for the Department of History, Jill Lepore.
Still getting used to my card. I kind of want my card. I thought we really need to begin with a moment of silence, thinking about those empty seats in Fenway for those of us who are fans of the home team. Okay, that's all. I don't like being the lead-off batter because it's too much pressure, I'm going to whiff. But I've been asked to come here to talk to you about what baseball teaches us about history, or what history teaches us about baseball. And I thought I would try to talk a little bit about the historical method. And to do that, I wanted to begin with a definition. What is history? History is the art of making an argument by telling a story about dead people. So here's a dead person. And here's my argument. This man was the greatest shortstop of all time. And here's my story. Honus Wagner was the son of German immigrants, Pennsylvania coal miners, hence his nickname, the Flying Dutchman. He went down in the coal mines too when he was 14 years old, but he played baseball, and he went pro in 1895 with the Louisville Colonels. History is a mode of humanistic inquiry. History is part of the humanities, but it is also a social science. It's the only discipline here that straddles those two divisions of the university. And anything that historians say has got to be proven. It has to meet a set of standards of evidence that satisfy both humanists who want to hear a good story and satisfy social scientists who want to be able to count things and have a metric to prove something. With evidence, every assertion that you make as a historian has to be able to be proven with evidence from an archive, from a museum, or from the world in which we live. So let me go back to my definition of what history is and revise it. History is the art of making an argument by telling a story about dead people in which every element of that argument requires evidence. So, is this man dead? Yes. I can prove it. He is buried in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. I'm one step on my way towards proving that this man was the greatest shortstop of all time. So, what is my evidence for that assertion? I've proven that he's dead. Was he the greatest shortstop of all time? What are the metrics that we might use to try to measure his greatness? Well, we might be interested to know that his purchase by the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1900 was the greatest amount of money that had ever been paid in a baseball trade up to that point in American history. It made news all over the country. Now, you might ask whether this is a good measurement of the greatness of a ball player. You might think about J.D. Drew. Is there a correlation between the amount of money paid for a ball player and his talent?
John Lackey. Yeah.
I think we must conclude that this evidence as a metric is worth jack. So here is another standard of evidence. The value of his baseball card. This is Honus Wagner's baseball card from 1909. In 2007, it sold for $2.8 million. It is the greatest amount of money ever paid for a baseball card. We might ask, is having the most valuable baseball card a measurement of the greatness of a player? Does the price of this card in 2007 demonstrate that Honus Wagner is the greatest shortstop in the history of baseball? Well, no. This evidence is worthless. The reason that Honus Wagner's, does anyone know why Honus Wagner's baseball card is worth so much money? There are so few of them. Why are there so few of them?
He had them withdrawn for his own reasons.
He had them withdrawn for his own reasons. Excellent. A plus. They're in. What were his own reasons?
Tobacco card.
Right. The cards were printed by a tobacco company. They were sold to children. Wagner agreed to have one made, and then he regretted it, and he returned the $10 he was paid in the initial agreement and asked the company to recall the cards. They were recalled. They're thought to be only at a maximum about 50 in circulation. Okay, so why was Honus Wagner paid so much? Well, he was paid so much, I'm going to make a series of assertions about his talent now, because he was known for his fielding. We can ask Honus Wagner about this. This is a letter. Remember, historians need to go to the archives. Every story I tell you about a dead person in which I am making an argument requires evidence that can be reproduced. This is a letter that Honus Wagner wrote to a fan who had written to him, "What is the hardest play you ever made?" He wrote back on the back of the page, "One of the hardest plays I ever made was with the bases full and the other club needing 1 run to tie and 2 to win. Infield playing end to stop a run at the plate. Batter hits a low line hit to my right. I dove for the ball and caught it with my bare hand about 3 inches from the ground. My jump took me head first to the ground and I came up with the ball and made a double play." Okay, that's a nice piece of evidence, but would we trust Honus Wagner about his own amazing startling talent on the field? Probably not. Nevertheless, his talent on the field also found a place in the poetry of Ogden Nash. We now have the mythical entering our realm of evidence. Honus Wagner was also known for his hitting. Here we have a picture of Honus Wagner in 1905 when he became the first baseball player to have his signature branded into a Louisville Slugger bat, making him not only the best paid baseball player at the time, but the first professional athlete in American history to endorse an athletic product. Now this, as a historian, ought to give us some pause and introduce several degrees of skepticism. Because now, who has an interest in promoting the idea that Honus Wagner is a great baseball player? The Louisville Slugger Company. Nevertheless, we have some other measures we could look to. Yes, he was fast. He was the Flying Dutchman. Yes, there's some evidence that he participated in some great plays. We know that he was a celebrated hitter, enough that the Louisville Batting Company chose him to be the first endorser of its product. But he also led the Pittsburgh Pirates to a World Series victory over the Detroit Tigers in 1909, for which he was much celebrated. He retired from baseball in 1917, and here we get to another metric whereby we might evaluate my initial argument that Honus Wagner is the best shortstop ever to play the game. When the Hall of Fame opened in 1936, only 5 men were inducted. Who were they? Pop quiz.
Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Christy Matthews, Honus Wagner.
Yeah, we've got them all. Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Christy Mathewson, Walter Johnson, and Honus Wagner, the fabulous 5. If you can read this plaque, what does it say about Honus Wagner? That he was the greatest shortstop in baseball history. Am I done? No. What's the problem with this as a piece of historical evidence?
They also let Jim Rice in the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Sorry? history continues. This was a long time ago, 1936. There have been other shortstops since then. You might want to propose them. Okay, well, the standard metric in baseball, baseball really works as an archive. Baseball creates its own quantitative sources. It has a series of statistics that attach to each player. And by that metric, we can say this about Honus Wagner. Honus Wagner ranks third in triples, 252, seventh in hits, 3,415, and in doubles, 640, eighth in stolen bases, 722, and at bats, 10,430. He's also in the top 20 in games played, total bases, runs batted in, runs, extra base hits. He has the highest lifetime batting average of any shortstop, with 327, and only one other shortstop has ever stolen more bases. Now, even if I could prove to you that that makes him statistically the best and greatest shortstop in all of baseball history, we might ask a different question. Isn't being great in baseball about being loved by fans? Well, one of my favorite stories about Honus Wagner is that in the very beginning of professional baseball, a lot of fans kept scrapbooks. There's a scrapbook owned in the Baseball Hall of Fame kept by a young girl named Daisy Campbell, starting when she was a teenager, and she was mainly in love with Honus Wagner. This isn't it. This is someone else's scrapbook. I've never seen Daisy Campbell's scrapbook, but I think it's clearly worth a visit to Cooperstown. This is a fraudulent piece of evidence, but it's a good example of how important it is for historians to go to the archives and find things out, because I would really want to know, what did she clip and why did she clip it, and did she put little hearts with Daisy Loves Honus inside of her scrapbook? So, this does finally get us to sort of return in a circular fashion to my initial question about whether Honus Wagner is the greatest shortstop ever, because we haven't really defined what it is to be a great shortstop. And it's a similar question to what makes a great historian. That's just another thought about Daisy Campbell. This man is often thought to have been, but not by me, the greatest historian of the 20th century. Does anyone know who this guy is? This guy is dead. I could tell you a story about him. He was the last Harvard professor to ride his horse to work. Samuel Eliot Morison, thought by some to be the greatest American historian of the 20th century. He had an idea about what made a great historian. He said a great historian was a historian who knew how to let the facts speak. Well, it turns out that Honus Wagner had an answer to the question, what makes a great ball player? And that's where I'd like to end my remarks this evening. A great ball player by Honus Wagner. There ain't much to being a ball player if you're a ball player. Thank you.